Welcome, everyone, to the 5,521st meeting of the Rotary Club of Chicago, the world's first service club. Thank you so much for joining today. We have a great program, a great speaker, and a lot of good fellowship along the way. So lately I've been starting out with a Rotary moment that showcases a club of one of our visitors. Unfortunately, 3 minutes before the meeting was scheduled to begin, the visitor from the Rotary Club of Cagliari, Sardinia, said that an emergency prevented him from attending. So you're going to hear about the Rotary Club of Cagliari from me. Yeah, here are some pictures. It's a truly beautiful place. I've learned that Cagliari is the capital of Sardinia, which is one of the islands off of Italy. The Rotary Club there has a long history. It was founded 70 years ago. It celebrated its 70th anniversary in November of last year, and is very active in the community. We're going to have Richard Knowlton visit us today, but unfortunately he could not make it. So if you are ever in Sardinia, please stop in to the club, and I'm sure they will welcome you with open arms. The thought for the day today is going to be given by our longtime member, Gail Anderson.
Good afternoon, everyone. Marshall emailed me very early this morning and asked me to do this. So I have been hearing a lot and reading a lot lately about James Baldwin. So I pulled up a couple of quotes from him, and I will just read them. I have 3 quotes, and they all seem very timely for the situation today. The first one is, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hates so stubbornly is because they sense that once the hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with pain. Life is tragic simply because the earth turns and the sun inexorably rises and sets, and one day, for each of us, the sun will go down for the last time. Perhaps the whole root of our trouble, the human trouble, is that we will sacrifice all the beauty of our lives, will imprison ourselves in totems, crosses, blood sacrifices, steeples, mosques, races, armies, flags, nations, in order to deny the fact of death, the only fact we have. It seems to me that one ought to rejoice in the fact of death, ought to decide, indeed, to earn one's death by confronting with passion the conundrum of life. One is responsible for life. It is the small beacon in that terrifying darkness from which we come and to which we shall all return.
Thank you very much, Gail. I think one thing to take from that is that Rotary, as an organization, brings people together of all faiths, colors, nationalities, and together we face life. And so, thank you very much for sharing.
You're very, very welcome.
Today we have a very interesting speaker that was brought to the club by David Hirsch, and David will be introducing our speaker. If you have any questions for him, please type them in the chat box. We will be monitoring the chat box. Hopefully at the end of his presentation, Terry will have time to answer questions. We'll take questions at the end from the chat box or orally. One other favor to ask, I think most of you have done this, but if you could consider renaming yourself if your name doesn't appear, so that we know who everyone is. David?
Thanks, Marshall. It's my pleasure to introduce Terry Brady, who's the president and CEO of Underwriters Laboratories, companies whose roots date back to the World's Columbian Exposition held here in Chicago in May of 1893. UL, as the company is known, serves 80,000 customers worldwide and employs more than 14,000 people, including more than half outside the United States. Prior to joining UL, Terry was a partner at Winston & Strawn, where he had worked for 27 years, concentrating his practice in mergers and acquisitions, securities offerings, and corporate governance. United Laboratories was actually one of his clients. Terry graduated with honors from Dartmouth College and Notre Dame Law School, where he was the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Law, Ethics, and Public Policy. Terry serves on the board of trustees of Cristo Rey St. Martin College Prep and the board of directors of the Chicago Botanic Garden. He is also a member of the Economic Club of Chicago, the Executives Club of Chicago, and the Asia Society. Terry and his wife, Cynthia, live in Winnetka and have 2 adult sons. And before I turn the Zoom stage over to Terry, I'd like to have a short promo video entitled Empowering Trust that I'd like to share with the audience.
Today, trust matters. It no longer comes standard or is passed down from another era. Trust is quickly becoming table stakes, and it has to be authentic. That's why UL helps iconic brands and startups build trust for the market needs of today and the growth and development of tomorrow. Because companies innovate on trust, and we help advance it. Smart cities are connecting on trust, so we help secure it. Sustainable business grows with trust. We help nurture it. At UL, we offer an independent perspective that provides scientific-based testing and certification, audit and inspection services, as well as data-driven digital solutions. We help empower safety, security, and sustainability for well-being around the globe. Because the world runs on trust, and UL can help you earn it. UL, empowering trust.
Thank you, Karen. It's my pleasure to welcome Terry Brady, President and CEO of Underwriters Laboratories, to the Rotary One Zoom stage. Terry, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, David, and good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Great. Well, it's an honor to be with you this afternoon in this virtual setting, and I think we have people around the world, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone on the call. I grew up in Evanston, and I've been therefore aware of Rotary International and your work for many years. In fact, I remember when your current headquarters building was being put up in the 1970s for American Hospital Supply, another major business headquartered in Evanston. And it's interesting that our 2 companies, Underwriters Laboratories and Rotary, are both mission-based organizations. We're almost the same age. UL is about 11 years older, I think, than Rotary. We're celebrating 126 years this year. And like Rotary, we're global, and we have both a board of trustees and a board of directors. So in a lot of ways, we're similar organizations, and maybe in some ways, there are people who are close to our missions that know a lot about us. There are probably lots of folks that are a little vague on who Rotary is and maybe a little more vague on who UL is. So I welcome this opportunity to share with you a little bit about UL and our mission and our journey and how we try to make the world a safer place. So I'm going to also try to share a couple slides. So as I said, UL was founded around 126 years ago, and maybe some of you know the story, but I'll share with you that our founding actually coincided with the Columbian Exposition, the World's Fair that was held in Chicago on the grounds of Hyde Park and the Museum of Science and Industry 125 years ago. At that World's Fair, electricity, believe it or not, was the demonstration technology. You've probably heard of the Palace of Light, and maybe may have read the novel, The Devil in the White City. The World's Fair grounds were, as I say, were right where the edge of the University of Chicago campus. And one of the fair buildings, the only fair building that exists today, is our Museum of Science and Industry down in Hyde Park. It was built as the art pavilion for the World's Fair, and therefore it was built using normal construction methods. All the other buildings that were on the fairgrounds were made of wood and paper mache. They were sort of temporary buildings, and they were being wired with light for the first time. And if you can imagine, you know, people like Edison and Tesla and Westinghouse were down in the fairgrounds still arguing amongst themselves about what technology should be used. Should it be AC or DC based, and how should the wiring work? Well, fires were breaking out as they strung these wires and newfangled lights all through the fairgrounds. And the Chicago fire officials, who had recent memory of the Chicago fire a few decades earlier, actually threatened to shut down this entire World's Fair unless someone could get control of these fires. So the fair organizers hired a young engineer named William Henry Merrill. I don't think there was anything called an electrical engineer at that time because electricity was really new. But they hired this young fellow Merrill and said, Henry, make these fires stop so the fair can go forward. And he and his colleagues did the best they could to sort of move wires apart and stop the conflagrations. And after the fair concluded, the insurance companies of the day realized that electric light was here to stay, and no one really knew anything about it. And it needed to be studied and standards needed to be developed. So they chipped in some money, and I think that's where our name Underwriters Laboratories comes from. And they they hired this fellow, William Henry Merrill, and a small team, and found some space above a firehouse in downtown Chicago. It was actually the hayloft that the horses used. They cleaned the hay out and they put these fellows up there, and they began studying the risks that are presented to us and the opportunities that are presented to us from electricity. And that's really our founding here in Chicago 126 years ago. Today, we continue to fulfill that mission, which is to help create safer living and working environments for people everywhere. And we do it in four principal ways. We develop safety standards for products, a huge variety of products. We have about 1,700 different safety standards in effect today. And each of our standards are put together by sort of legislative panels, standards technical panels of experts from academia, from business, from government, UL scientists and others. 40 or 50 people will sit on each panel for each standard and try to come up on a consensus basis with the best way to develop and write a standard. And they're constantly being changed, as you can imagine. So we develop safety standards. We do pure research on emerging issues of safety science. We do education and outreach, trying to talk to stakeholders, and I'll show you in a couple slides the broad variety of stakeholders we talk to explain to them our learnings and scientific discovery around safety science. And finally, we do a huge amount of product safety testing and conformity assessment to confirm that product samples comport with not only our standards, but other global standards for China, for India, for Japan, for Korea, for Europe, South America, Latin America, for Africa, because manufacturers and innovators want to get their products on store shelves around the globe, not just on US store shelves. So we test against standards wherever our clients want to sell their products. And today, those four activities are done in really two organizations in one. The parent company, Underwriters Laboratories, is a nonprofit organization, and I lead the parent company. And then about 8 years ago, we moved most of our testing and conformity assessment businesses into a subsidiary group of companies under the umbrella company UL Inc. And so today our testing and certification work happens in our subsidiaries around the globe, running testing laboratories. And then the revenue and the proceeds from the testing is what supports the missionary work we do in the parent company around standards, research, and education and outreach. So board of trustees that I sit on oversees the work of Underwriters Laboratories and our leaders. And then we appoint a board of directors in turn that manages and oversees the very large testing business that, again, is our source of funding. I mentioned we're celebrating 126 years. Today we have about 14,000, well over 14,000, nearly 15,000 colleagues working in more than 40 countries. So we've grown quite a bit beyond the handful of fellows up in a fire loft in downtown Chicago. We now operate labs where products are made, because innovators and designers don't want to ship all their samples to our laboratories here in the Chicago area or in the States. They want us to be able to test products where products are made. So as an example, today we have about 3,000 people in China, and we're all across Asia, we're all across Europe, South America, Latin America, and the United States, and a small presence in Africa. On the lower left, you see that our customers are located in more than 100 countries. And we're very proud that we've evolved over the last years beyond simply product safety testing, also looking at sustainability implications of products. And now we have our sustainability standards are referenced in more than 900 product specifications around the world. For those of you based in the US, you will have seen our mark, of course, on your Christmas tree lights or on the back of your toaster or your, your power drill or the power brick for your computer. We estimate that within an American home, our UL in a circle certification mark might be found on about 150 different objects around your house. So if you want during the remainder of our shelter-in-place rules, you can go around or tell your kids to go around or grandchildren to see how many UL marks they can see in your house. And our headquarters is here in Chicago. Now we're up in Northbrook. We outgrew our fire loft and moved up to Northbrook in around the 1960s. And today we have about 1,700 colleagues working in lab, sort of combined lab and office space. You will see our campus. It's a campus of probably 20 buildings. Right off the spur, if you're familiar with Chicago or based in Chicago, when you take a spur between the Edens Expressway and the Tri-State Expressway toward Milwaukee, you'll go through a little east-west spur and you'll see our campus. And I'm anxious to get back there. I'm working from home now. I think if you can, when I come back off the slideshow mode, the graphic behind me is a picture in front of our building. I mentioned that we work with a broad group of stakeholders in promoting global safety through our research and data sharing. This graphic sort of gives you a sense of who is the most important conversations audience for us as we carry out our work. So briefly, we work with a broad variety of stakeholders every day. We're in constant conversations with government agencies and academic institutions. We partner with many of the major engineering schools and national labs in doing research. Organizations like Argonne Labs, Lawrence Livermore Labs, Oakley, Case Western, University of Maryland, University of Tennessee, Georgia Tech, Duke, Dartmouth College, Northwestern. So we work with many, we partner on our research with many national labs and university labs. We work with many other standards developers and international government organizations, think tanks, and what we call as authorities having jurisdiction on the bottom. Those are code authorities from states and municipalities and national governments. They have a huge role in helping us understand the evolution of products and product risk within their jurisdiction. So we're constantly talking with electric authorities, fire authorities about their what they're seeing and what we're developing, and how many of our standards end up embedded in national or local codes and regulations. Next slide. Thank you. And then within our parent company, within the research and standards development work, Today we've got a specific focus and expertise in the 6 areas that are indicated on the slide here. Battery safety remains a key focus area for Underwriters Laboratories. When you think about all the lithium-ion batteries that you have in your home, or when we used to go on airplanes, or hopefully go on airplanes again soon, consider all the devices we bring with us. Those devices have advanced our lives and made our lives much easier. But as everyone knows, there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of risks. So we have a deep expertise and investment in improving battery safety. Chemical insights on the top right. We think that the risks and the benefits proposed to us by innovations in chemistry are in many ways the modern day analog to the electricity innovations that we were founded to study 126 years ago. We have in our homes today, in our offices, as you know, our furnishings are made now increasingly with polyethylene and other plastic or petroleum-based products. Our homes and offices are much tighter because of sustainability and energy efficiency, and yet very little has been studied about the intersection of chemicals and human health as they relate to products and furnishings within buildings. So we have a significant expertise and investment in understanding the intersection of chemicals and human health. Data science on the middle left, we think that data is a fundamental component of any scientific research. And so we do a lot of data analytics to backstop all of our pure science. I mentioned before education and outreach. We view it a compelling part of our mission to make sure that we share our learnings, not only in peer-reviewed journals that other scientists would read, but in consumer outreach and educator outreach to governments around the world. So we maintain a constant dialogue because we realize we don't have all the answers. We learn a lot about the societal needs through those dialogues. Fire safety, I think those of you that know something about you well will know that, really since those days of trying to stop the fires on the world's fairgrounds, fire safety and firefighter safety is really a core part of our mission. Every life safety system you'll see in your home or office building in the US typically will be UL tested, UL certified. And we do an awful lot of work today with increasing the safety of first responders. You might have seen our Close Before You Doze videos where we're trying to educate consumers about the importance of keeping your bedroom door shut at night and the difference in the fire risk to you if you're in a bedroom with a closed door versus an open door. And also with first responders, it used to be the case that if your grandparents' house caught fire in a lamp in the living room or a cigarette, you had at least 17 minutes to get out of the house safely before there was a serious risk of a flashover or an explosion of fire. Today, it's as little as 3 minutes because of what's in our homes. And so we're also educating firefighters that after the first 3 minutes from the time the fire broke out, they have to think seriously about their ability to go into the home. And I think I've already talked about standards. So next slide. We think that discovery is just the first step in the mission to promote science to help create a safer world for all of us. And so really the research I'd mentioned, the engagement with stakeholders, and then building foundation capabilities through resources, facilities, tools, and technology. That's the mission we're on right now. We've been at this for 126 years, but we've grown our footprint of our product safety testing organization. We've grown the footprint of where we work. And so we have the ability to increase the amount of investment we're making in cutting edge research. Our goal is to continue our journey to be the world's leading safety science research organization. And that's the mission the trustees have given me and my team. So in some ways, this is an inflection point in a 125-year journey. We've grown to 14,000 people. We have about 80,000 unique testing customers around the world who send us an increasing amount of testing work, and therefore we will continue to increase our mission work. Next slide. This is a quick graphic just to give you an indication of our geographic reach. The size of the circles represent, of course, the size of our populations, but you can see from this graph that we're all through North America. We're increasing our presence in South America and Africa. We're heavy in Europe and all through Southeast Asia and in the subcontinent of India, and a little bit in Australia and New Zealand. Next slide. So that's really, I think, a quick overview, and I'd be pleased to take questions. We celebrated our 125th last year. We actually went back down to the Museum of Science and Industry campus where we were founded and celebrated with a broad group of our stakeholders. And we're preparing now for the next 125 years, continuing our mission. There's sort of really no one like us. There are other organizations that do product safety testing that come out of Europe and others, but we're the only one of our type that has no owners. We are self-sustaining through our testing revenue, and our mission is something that really we think makes us a unique place to work. We have many, many long-time employees who tell us that they can be an electric engineer anywhere or a mechanical engineer anywhere, but many of them will tell us that they work for UL because they think we're making a difference. In my case, I was helping UL grow our reach through a lot of acquisition work over the last 10 or 15 years. And then the board asked me to join as the chief legal officer. And then in the last couple of years, asked me to become our chief executive officer. So it's a singular honor. It's a unique company. And if any of you in the Chicago area, or if you're visiting Chicago or another major city, if you're in Beijing or Guangzhou or Suzhou or Tokyo or Bangalore or any place in Europe, and you want to visit a UL facility, please let me know. And if you want to see us in Northbrook, our door is always open. So why don't I pause there? And I hope that was helpful and useful to you, and be pleased to take questions.
Terry, this is David Hirsch. I just want to say thank you for an informative and enlightening presentation. And before we go to the Q&A, I just want to offer a quick shout out to our mutual friend, Greg Brown, the CEO of Motorola, for making the introduction. And if it's okay with you, Marshall, I'll just start with a two-part question. They're unrelated. First of all, this is the easy one. How in the world did the company trademark the phrase empowering trust? And then secondly, what has been UL's involvement in the COVID-19 crisis?
Thank you, David. So, well, a couple of things. When we sit and think about, well, what do we make, right? We don't make any products. We have all these labs around the world, and we have all this footprint, but we don't make anything except we make trust. And that's what we think. We're an ingredient brand. As I said, you'll see our mark on 150 products in your home, but you'll also see our mark in many, many products. You won't see our mark in many, many products that we test every day, and I'll speak to that in a minute. But the common element is trust. Because no one owns UL, and we've been simply trying to make the world safer for 125 years, we believe that we've engendered a huge amount of trust among all the stakeholders that I showed on that slide a few minutes ago. As an example, with the batteries and the lithium-ion batteries, we have been convening, and we're a trusted convener for people that wouldn't normally be seen in the same room with one another. As an example, the lithium-ion battery manufacturers, the transport aircraft companies, transport aviation like FedEx, UPS, DHL, and the airlines and governments, they'll all come and talk to one another because UL has convened a summit where before they wouldn't talk to one another. Another example is where we're a trusted convener, we believe, is that in clothing, children's clothing, there's federal regulations, as I think most people in the US know, and they're in place in many other parts of the globe, about the requirement for a fire-resistant coatings in children's clothing or some other performance protection on children's clothing. Well, most of the performance enhancements today is put on by a chemical spray that's put on the children's clothing. And what UL's trying to do is help people understand the intersection between affordable, safe, fire safe and chemical safe children's clothing. And to this point in time, there's been sort of a tension between making something affordable and making it safe to wear, safe for a baby chemically, and making it fire performance. And those are the people in those industries, rarely would get a room, but they all trust. The common element was trust and trust of UL. So we looked around and we thought, well, that's our product. Maybe that should be our tagline, something about trust. And we tried, of course, 100 different things. And we realized that empowering trust was not registered previously and it was available. And we think that that captures what we try to do. We've built up a reputation over 126 years. We realized that it could be damaged or destroyed very quickly. Look at all the issues going on today and the lack of trust that people are seeing in different institutions. So we guard that trust very carefully. We think it is our product, and it's something that it's our core deliverable to the world. And I mentioned that you'll see our to transition to the COVID. What are we doing in COVID? Well, a couple things. We've had many of our essential lab operations going nonstop through the COVID crisis. So we've had some real heroes in our labs around the world continuing to test medical products, medical devices. We test, everything from, a broad variety of medical devices and emergency devices. And we also test, and it's probably not much known by anyone who may know a little bit about UL. They probably won't know that we have a major business that tests performance of various products to brand specifications. So what do I mean by that? When you go to a big box store that has their own brands, or a big pharmacy chain that has their own brands, and you'll see this shampoo says, or this aspirin says, just like the brand. Well, we have a major business in testing those products, which are largely made by third-party manufacturers, and giving a private report to our customer to confirm that their products that they're buying from third-party manufacturing actually is like the branded product, and therefore is safe, and therefore is effective. And a lot of the things we've been doing specifically around COVID is testing PPE of all sorts, testing personal protective equipment for first responders, for hospital employees. And we can't discuss, specific client situations. It's just our policy not to do that. But we've had some pretty neat stories where UL workers coming to the labs as essential workers, despite the various shelter-in-place rules around the world. We've received appropriate exemptions, and we've done things like really accelerated testing of masks, of gowns, of gloves, of all the things that are needed around the world to help get the right products in the hands of the right folks.
Terry, I have a couple questions. One is, could you discuss the interplay between government regulation, like through the FDA, and the work that you do? It seems like there's an overlap there, and how much cooperation is there between your organization and government agencies? Great
question. So I'll speak mostly to the U.S. For many, many years, well, really, I mean, almost, I'd say for as long as anyone can remember, the U.S. Government has relied particularly on product safety standards on a private-public partnership with standards developers, with UL and many others, people like the ASTM and ASHRA and NFPA. There's a whole alphabet soup, but our government believes that private standards developers, I think, are more efficient, frankly, than government agencies in terms of coming up with product safety and product performance standards. And so the US system for many years has been to rely on private standards developers that are under the American National Standards Institute umbrella. So we're accredited by ANSI and monitored that our processes are fair and open and consensus based. And what happens then is we're constantly talking to government agencies about, like CPSC, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, or NIST, the National Institute of Science and Technology, about gaps in standards or standards where there's a new product development. Think about, how the internet entered everything in our house. Your washer now can talk to your dryer. Well, what should the standard be around that? And the US approach has been to support this public-private partnership. And then in many cases, a standard will actually get incorporated by reference into a regulation. So if you pull out the electrical code in your town or your state, or the fire code, you'll see many times, instead of Northbrook, Illinois, or Chicago, Illinois, or the state of Illinois trying to develop a laundry list of product safety standards that apply only in the state of Illinois or in the city of Chicago, they'll say that the installation of the wiring outside your porch in a wet environment needs to conform with UL standard 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that partnership is something that the U.S. system has relied on for many years. We think it works pretty well, but it's the other point I'd make is the standards system in the U.S. anyway, in many countries, is largely voluntary. So there are those standards that say in order to install a lamp outside in a restaurant, it needs to conform to UL standard 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But most of the standards that people come to us for testing, the scheme in the U.S. is largely voluntary. There's a set of OSHA regulations that say that the kind of big machinery and equipment that's used in say a factory or in a dentist office. I always think of that big drill that has electric and water all sort of mixed in, that big giant thing the dentist has. There's OSHA regulations that say in professional environments, machinery and equipment that's electric or water needs to be third-party tested by a nationally recognized laboratory. It doesn't say UL, and there's about 20 entities today that are qualified as nationally recognized laboratories. But that's a very limited set of products that the government requires be third-party tested. The rest of the third-party testing is really because brands, they want to know they're selling a better product, a safer product. And with again, in the US scheme, with our serious risk of product liability and our whole tort law system that we all are familiar with, many brands and brand owners believe that by coming to an independent lab like UL and having your product tested against applicable standards, that can be a powerful defense against, well, two things: the risk of actually having an unsafe product, being surprised by it, because when they send us samples, many samples fail, and then people learn what the failure is and they make a better product. So many brands come to us and other third parties testers because they think they're going to get a better product, but then it also gives them defense against product liability litigation.
Yeah, Terry, thank you. And one other follow-up question on that, I'd like you to just comment, if you could. We had a question in the chat box about empowering trust in India.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the question is, could you just touch upon how other countries are different than the United States when it comes to what you do?
Great, thank you. Great question. So, well, a couple things. I think today we recognize that for the first 125 years that we've been around, probably the vast majority of our work has been around North American safety standards and products that are being made wherever they're made in the world that are coming into the U.S. or North American markets and testing those for safety. But in in recent years, we've tried to focus more and more on what we call local for local. And so trying to develop, trying to sort of humbly study and understand local needs in other countries, and then not sort of looking at our existing toolbox and thinking about what can we bring from our existing toolbox and provide to that country, but what can we develop in country for country. And so in India, for example, and I spend a lot of time in India, and I'm a huge fan of so many things about India and our Indian colleagues and the Indian culture. We know that every day in India, more than 300 people are struck down and killed in roadway accidents. You know, that's like a jumbo jet crashing every single day in India. And you never hear that anywhere outside of India. It's just not publicized. And we thought that, you know, that is a major risk, particularly for children and disabled people. And we began studying, our team decided they wanted some budget to study roadway safety in India. And so we've worked with the Indian authorities, the Bureau of India Standards, and the Ministry of Commerce, and their Bureau of Investigation. And we realized that many of these injuries were caused by bus drivers that can't see people walking in the road as they're driving through. And we realized that with a small adjustment or with additional mirrors, we could help bus drivers see pedestrians in the roadways in the various cities and towns across India. Well, once we proved that, many local governments started putting these additional mirrors on the buses, and we believe we're saving lives. The other thing we realized is that we have all these videos with Disney, for example, using the characters Timon and Pumbaa to try to teach safety concepts, fire safety, electric safety, swimming safety to young children. Well, we've translated those now into about 30 languages. And we've done, and you can find online, a whole host of teaching and training with the fire authorities and public schools, elementary schools in India, about fire safety, because it's just not a concept in the curriculum the way it is here. You know, get low and go and all the things we've taught our kids isn't done. And so we've had great support from the India Fire Services and the India education ministers to put that in. And then we sponsor a national safety science quiz across India. The finals are held on New Delhi TV, NDTV, every year. And I had the privilege of handing the check out. So India is an example. We're also doing things local for local in China, local for local in Brazil. But the main message is it's not all about North America. Our mission doesn't say help create, you know, safe living and working environments for people living in North America. It's for people living everywhere. So increasingly over the next 125 years, we will look to see how we might make a contribution in other geographies. So thank you for that question.
Yeah. Terry, thank you very much. If I'm not hearing other questions or seeing other questions in the chat box, as members know, we like to give a little gift to our speakers to thank them for their time and insight. And we really appreciate you sharing your story and sharing UL's story. It's absolutely fascinating. I went to school on the South Side, and the story about the World's Fair was really very, very interesting. So thank you very much. We commissioned a local organization called Ignite, which teaches glass blowing to disadvantaged youth. And so for each of our speakers this year, we're giving them a custom votive that was made just for our speakers in the yellow and blue of Rotary. We like to think that that service ignites our soul. And so please, we will send you one of these and use it in good health and pursuant to all the fire codes that are attendant to what you do at UL. but we really appreciate your time and thank you so very much for being with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for that gift. I'll enjoy it, and stay safe and well, everyone. Take care.
So now we move on to a somewhat newer portion of our meeting, which is really optional. We'd like to provide the opportunity for our members to share joys and concerns, anything good that's happened in your life recently, or anything not so good that you'd like to share. We found in this age of COVID, with people isolated and by themselves, that we like to provide a forum for people to share. Sometimes it helps with the isolation. Do I have any takers today? Don't forget to unmute yourself if you want to talk.
Marshall, it's Gene Sullivan. I just wanted to say, from previous meetings, you were talking about trying to introduce people to Rotary, and on the screen is my niece, Anna Sullivan. She was in from school. She's a nursing major at Belmont University, and so I said, you got to listen to this talk right now.
Well, that's great, Gene.
Learned a lot.
So welcome. It's good to have you, and hopefully you learned something, and even more importantly, that you learned something about Rotary. So I hope to see you again, or I hope that you check out other local Rotaries wherever you might find yourself. We're actually a pretty fun bunch, and we really enjoy each other's companies. And it looks like you have some more guests wandering through there, Gene. You guys can start
the next Rotary meeting.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Anyone else? All right, no one else wants to join in. Okay. Now it's the time of our meeting where we introduce guests of Rotary. When we're in person, we usually do this in order, but on Zoom, it's a little easier if we just kind of go through the gallery view, and if people could just unmute themselves and introduce themselves, a name, if you're a Rotarian, what club you're from, and how you found out about the meeting today. And I guess we'll start with Kishori, who's become a frequent visitor of our clubs. It's great to see to our club. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, I'm Kishore Sankara, President, Rotary Club of Rajahmundry River City, India, RA District 3020. I'm a sportsman and a researcher on sports development and a community and sports psychologist. I visited Chicago last year, and I attended Biennial Conference on community psychology, been working on it. And I pray God that today's meeting is quite exemplary. It is trustworthy, and the way study has introduced the impact in India is quite educative. We'll see. We also will try to follow the safety measures which he has envisaged in this meeting. A very fascinating, highly informative. Thanks, Marshall, for giving me an opportunity. And I'm very proud that I could come to Chicago RI1. It's it's a blessing for any Rotarian to visit both Evanston and Rotary 1. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Next up on my screen is Aurelio Ramirez.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm from Rotary Club Madrid Zarzuela in Spain. I've been in the three previous meetings with you, and I've been in Chicago at your Rotary Club 5 years ago. So nice meeting you.
Thank you so much for coming. Next up, another repeat visitor, Val. Tell us.
Hi, Marshall. Thank you for the invite there. Val Talley, I'm the Chief of Police of Maywood, Illinois, and I'm with the Maywood Proviso Rotary Club. I like the speakers and the group interactions. Thank you again for having me, and I look forward to more meetings.
Yeah, and Val, your club is really doing some great Zoom meetings, really raising the dialogue on some important issues. So thank you to your club.
Well, thank you, and I don't know if you added that I'm just going to be a little braggadocious. We were one of the top Rotary clubs for this year. So
yeah, and it was well deserved.
Thanks.
Stephanie, you're up next.
I am, and I'm so happy to be a guest. I've been a presenter at local Rotaries in Wilmette and Evanston, and Marshall, your leadership is astounding, and the management company that supports you is just top notch. And I believe in the way you serve others, and it's very inspiring. I'll add that I grew up in Northbrook, Illinois, so United Laboratories, be still my heart. They've done a lot for the community of Northbrook.
So Stephanie, could you just tell us briefly what Service Speaks does?
Sure, we do elevation training for all organizations to uptick their service and customer experience. So manufacturing to legal firms and the city of Chicago right now.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and for the kind words. Let's see, going down the list. Let's see, who's next? If I miss someone, please chime in. I think.
President, could I come in?
Go ahead, Richard.
Okay, thank you very much, President. This is Richard Kalunji from the Rotary Club of Kampala South. Kampala South is in District 9211, which comprises Tanzania and Uganda in East Africa. President, I'm a medical doctor, I'm a communicator, I'm a home health care provider, I'm a Rotarian, I'm so many things. I've already made a request to the President-elect Eric that it will be a very big opportunity for Rotary One to do a project with us. I've already written a project in the line of dialysis, and I really want to connect with so many other people, not just in line of Rotary, but also in the line of communication and medical. Thank you very much, President.
Well, Richard, thank you so much. Also on the call was Margaret Hugo. She may have had to leave, but she's co-chair of our international committee, International Services Committee. And if you need to talk to someone about partnering on programs, Marga is a very good person to talk to. She will be president after Eric. So thank you all for coming. I'm going to go through just a few quick announcements. The first is at the end of the meeting, people will be assigned randomly to chat rooms. We're trying to encourage fellowship. What we've heard in discussions with our members and other Rotary clubs is that one thing that we lose a little when in the Zoom format is a sense of fellowship and the ability to talk before and after meetings on a more informal basis in smaller groups. So we've set up the opportunity, if you have a little bit of extra time, to participate in chat rooms after the meeting. So if you want to participate, just stick around after I bring the meeting closed, and you will be assigned to a chat room to talk about anything that you'd like. Sometimes people talk about the topic that the speaker touched upon. Sometimes they talk about current events. Whatever the case may be, please feel free to participate. I wanted to highlight a couple of our COVID-related projects. In the last 2 weeks in the Gyrator, there's been a report about the project that our Interact Club did, manufacturing masks for a local homeless shelter. And I really want to make sure that all the members are aware of how wonderful how wonderfully our Interact Club stepped up. They organized the project themselves. They they asked us for a few volunteers to transport materials between their homes because some of them can't drive because they're too young. They organized it from start to finish and did a really spectacular job, and we really, really appreciate their efforts. We're now in the home stretch of the annual campaign, which is being led by our President-elect, Eric Kempel. Any donations that you would like to be credited to this year's campaign need to be made before June 30, so we encourage you to contribute. On that score, I also wanted to alert the membership and seek any feedback that you might have with the going virtual. We have not had to spend quite as much money on lunches, and many of our members have continued to pay their regular dues, for which we are eternally grateful. We are looking at taking some of that money and putting it into our foundation and you would get credit towards a contribution to the annual campaign. So anyone who has thoughts on doing that, we would appreciate hearing from you. You can contact either me or Eric for that. Our club meetings are taking place over Zoom at different times. Our next meeting of the International Services Committee is scheduled for June 11th from 5:30 to 7. And you can look on the club website to get the Zoom address that you need. Just as a FYI, Eric and I are going to do a virtual tour of the Paul Harris Home. We've started doing virtual tours of the Paul Harris Home. We did one last week for the Kansas City 13 Club, and we thought it was very successful. It was really nice interacting with another club on a subject that we all have in common, the Paul Harris Home. So if you have not been able to visit the home, please look at the website. You can get the web address to attend that meeting. On June 30, we wanted to highlight that Eric Kempel will be inducted as the 117th president of the Rotary Club of Chicago, along with the other officers and directors of the club. It will, for the first time in history, it will be a historic installation. It will be done virtually, and it will be, as tradition has it, conducted by the incoming RI president, Holger Nacht, who will take over as of June 1 as the Rotary International president. Next week is a club assembly. It's a very special club assembly. It'll be my last club assembly, and we are going to discuss the strategic plan that has been assembled under the leadership of Eric Kempel. He will present what is, we think, a near final version of the plan for discussion and input, and we expect that the plan will be up for a vote at the first meeting of the board of directors under Eric's leadership. So please attend the meeting. We've had a couple of these along the way, but it would be really helpful to get your final input on the plan. So it will be distributed, the draft will be distributed before the meeting for you to take a look at. And so now we come to the time in the meeting when we recite the four-way test as a group. Typically, I ask a Rotarian to help us with that, and this week I think I'd like to ask if Val, if you're still with us, Val, if you could lead us in the four-way test. We'll mute everyone but you and lead us in the test.
Okay. The four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. First.
Is it the truth?
Second.
Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned?
Third. Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you all for coming. And if you'd like to share in a little fellowship, please stay on the line. Meeting adjourned.